Hi, in this subsection, let's explore if there's an exit criteria for threat modeling. It is by instinct that some people are driven by perfection and completeness. But in a world that is agile, how do we know we're done threat modeling? Well, threat models are usually never complete. We may become more and more comprehensive in trying to identify threats, and we may strive for completeness. But threat modeling needs to be perceived as a continuous process, in fact, a process that is highly embedded in your software development lifecycle. Here are some questions that are critical to answer the question of how do we know we're done threat modeling? When using Stride, some ways to answer the question, how do we know we're done threat modeling, is to review if there's a threat for every type in Stride. Or perhaps a better way would be to review if for every element in the data flow diagram, there's a threat for every type in Stride. Or maybe we combine that idea with a time box with the threat per element or the threat per type approach, because every activity needs to have time to deliver value. And in threat modeling, the value is not only to identify threats, but to address risks as well, effectively in securing a system's design. We might quickly come to a point where we have a threat for every element from every threat type in Stride. That would be 4 elements in a data flow diagram multiplied by 6 threats in Stride, which would be 24 threats. And we might hit that number of 24 threats really quickly before we have identified all the threats. So depending on the time you have at hand, you might choose the list of 24 threats is a great number for you to work with at this time. Or if there is more time, you might choose to identify more threats. If you're using one of the many gamified approaches to threat modeling, perhaps you might want to ensure all cards are distributed and the relevance of the threats in those cards are identified. Maybe an end goal is to file all the risks in a work tracking system. Sure, that sounds like a great way to manage risks in a central system, but is that a measure of, are we done with threat modeling? Well, there's not really a good answer for this question, and it varies from context to context, system to system, organization to organization. Some of the pointers here in this slide are indicative of identifying threats to a good extent, but they do not necessarily guarantee completeness. So keep improving the threat models continuously. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. We will move on to the next lecture.